Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation for Kubernetes, but I'm a product manager. I guess the title says it all. And the only plot twist here is that we have tried to make this different by using a board as opposed to slides. So first things first, let's begin with introductions. I'll start with myself. I'm Miguel. I've been working in product management for over 6 years. I'm an industrial engineer and worked with Levi Strauss a long time ago, where I got involved with lean techniques, but in the context of physical product manufacturing, the original context. After that, I worked in the UK in a startup for a number of years, and then GiveGab, which is a very popular telco network in the UK, which is community focused. And this is where I had my first taste of Kubernetes migrating from OpenShift to EKS. And after that, I moved to Pivotal, now VMware, where I've been working involved in the multi-cluster lifecycle management of Kubernetes operators. Okay, enough of me. Let's hear it from Matt.
Hey everyone, my name's Matt. I started my product management career in 2014, working at different consumer-facing startups, and then I switched over to the enterprise software world, joining VMware and spending the last few years working on developer marketplaces for tools like Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes.
Great. Let's talk about goals for this presentation. When we first landed into Kubernetes, it took us some time to react to what we were seeing. Given the first definition of Kubernetes being a container orchestration solution, being a product manager, the first question was a solution to which problems? Why do we need this? It is clear that Kubernetes solves different problems for different people depending on your context. And to help dig out some of these problems, we will take a product through the different stages of the product lifecycle and set some scenarios for how Kubernetes can help at each stage. The second goal is to gather some ideas on how product people can contribute to the Kubernetes community, and Matt will take us through this one at the end. We also have a fancy Kanban for an agenda for today, so I'll hand it over to Matt to take us through it and kick it off.
Thanks, Miguel. So let's quickly go over our agenda for today. We're going to start with talking through the product lifecycle and how it can apply to Kubernetes. We'll talk about some product practices you can apply, and then we'll talk about how you can get involved and do a quick Q&A at the end. The product lifecycle concept is more than 50 years old now, and for those who are unfamiliar with it, it essentially describes the 4 stages every product goes through in its life, from introduction and development through growth, maturity, and finally decline. Now, we're not going to go into this concept in any more detail, but there's lots of content easily available online for those who are interested in learning more about each stage or the origin of this framework. What we do want to do today is take a hypothetical product through each of these stages and share some ideas of how we think Kubernetes can help product teams building products in each stage. So let's get going. We're going to start work on a brand new product or initiative, and so we're in this introduction phase. What should we be thinking about here? Product teams at software companies need to spend as much time as possible iterating on their applications that actually deliver value to their customers. This is especially critical when you're working on something brand new, either at a startup or larger enterprise, and you need to find product market fit. The only way to know you're getting closer to this is to work out what you want to learn, plan how you're going to measure that, and then build and ship the smallest thing that will help you get that learning. For those familiar with the lean startup, this build, measure, learn loop will be very familiar. This is one of the most critical concepts of that movement, and your goal as a product manager in a product team is to minimize the amount of time it takes you to get through each of these stages. We think there are 3 different ways in which Kubernetes can help you reduce the time it takes you to get through this loop. To really optimize time spent in the build step, product teams need to be spending time writing the code that actually delivers value to their users. I co-founded a startup in 2015, and I remember spending more than half my time just trying to get the basic infrastructure up and running. Our users never saw this work, and there were many things that we ended up over-optimizing for because we were scared of having to go back and recreate lots of things later on. Paul Ingalls wrote a great post on Medium about USwitch's experience after they adopted Kubernetes. Their CTO said, "Teams don't realize how much they haven't had to do." You may have seen a complex modern application visualized using an iceberg before, and it's this stuff above the line that your customers truly get value from, not the stuff below. And so by adopting some of the out-of-the-box features that come with Kubernetes, product teams can spend more and more time above this waterline and get through the build cycle faster. So let's assume you've built the smallest thing you needed to build, to measure and learn from. Now you need to get this into your users' hands as quickly as possible. If you've worked in a large enterprise, you'll no doubt have faced long delays in getting your software deployed and available to your users. In many organizations we've spoken to, this is often weeks if not months. So this is one of the slowest aspects of the build, measure, learn cycle for many product teams we've spoken to historically. GIFGAF's Matthias, who leads their site reliability engineering and automation teams, told us that adopting Kubernetes has helped them reduce this time down from 2 weeks to half a day. This means that product teams at GIFGAF can run 20 times more experiments than before and get through the build, measure, learn loop 20 times faster. Uswitch saw something very similar, and this graph from the same blog post we spoke about a second ago shows Uswitch tripling their weekly deploys after adopting Kubernetes. And our final point on this one, again, is especially important when you're starting work on a new product or initiative. Kubernetes has a growing, thriving ecosystem right now, and many of these open source projects can help you increase your speed through the build, measure, learn loop. Using things like Bitnami's application catalog and OperatorHub.io, you could feasibly get a brand new feature or application built, deployed, and into your users' hands in a matter of hours. This rapid experimentation will help you learn what your customers need and help you get to product market fit faster. Okay, so let's assume we've built a reasonable product, we've got through this introduction phase, and we're starting to get into the exciting growth phase. Miguel, what should we be thinking about here?
Thank you, Matt. We're now growing, and it's great. Let's assume you're even thinking about expanding your business to other geographies. Someone talked to you about all the great benefits of containers, and you think, great, I just have to put my application in a container and it's fully portable. However, as Matt explained in the iceberg analogy, there is always something below the water level. And it is wise to have a quick exploration to avoid surprises. That said, let's talk about portability and what could be interesting for product managers. If you look at this guy here, struggling is to give you an idea of all the concepts an application developer needs to understand and use to run a single containerized application effectively in Kubernetes. There are approximately 15 Kubernetes concepts here, and this doesn't include supporting Kubernetes objects and tools for day 2 operations, which I don't even know much of myself. I'm not even suggesting that product managers need to understand all Kubernetes concepts, but it is good to get a glimpse and understand what portability really means for Kubernetes. And because you're in a stage of growth, it's the perfect time to set the foundation of your portability and how you plan on working with all this YAML even when you are even bigger. We asked this question to Matthias from GIFGAF. How would you deploy GIFGAF tomorrow somewhere else? Not sure why he picked Ohio, but his answer is very insightful. The key to portability is infrastructure as code. In other words, if you set your foundations right, then deployment in another area, country, or continent will be easy. However, you have to remember that during this stage, you're still experimenting with the lean mindset that Matt mentioned, trying to prove and disprove many hypotheses, and you need to move fast in inexpensive ways to learn what you need to learn. So what do? Luckily, there are many flavors of Kubernetes available to help you make a decision based on your particular circumstances. Meaning you don't have to spend too much time upfront setting up infra as a code before deciding Kubernetes is the right solution for you. Some of these opinionated Kubernetes can be an accelerator, but it's important to remember that you are sacrificing portability and you need to be aware of how far you can go into these solutions before you get locked in. If your goal is to move between clouds freely, for example, you might want to ignore a cloud-specific service and consider going up a layer of abstraction to deploy your applications. to a solution that is cloud agnostic. As an example of a cloud agnostic solution, in VMware, you might want to have a look at the Tanzu application service for Kubernetes, which you can deploy across multiple clouds. So that's all for the growth scenario. Matt, why don't we move this product into the maturity stage?
So you've launched this brand new product and you've grown it into a huge success. That's awesome. But at some point in time, the inevitable will happen and your product will reach the mature stage. This is especially prevalent in enterprises where long support contracts are common. And in this stage of the life cycle, your goal is to continue delivering value to your existing customers, whilst finding ways to increase your profits, often through reducing your costs. We've spoken to many organizations who have really struggled with the first part of this goal. How do you continue innovating and delivering more value when you're suddenly competing for resources across multiple projects and other new initiatives? And this is hard, especially if within a short space of time you've gone from, say, 10 to 10,000 developers. Regarding the second half of this goal, there are likely many ways you could do this, but one place we've seen Kubernetes really help is in reducing your infrastructure costs. So let's take a brief look into each of these bits. So you've grown to 10,000 developers, they work in awesome product teams trying to accelerate through the build, measure, learn cycle, and they're wanting to deploy tens of times every day. But your operations and security teams are in a lot of pain. Your infrastructure is exploding, and there's a high risk of things breaking, and they're reluctant to let product teams make all of these changes. What do you do? The best organizations we've spoken to who manage to consistently innovate at this kind of scale have all adopted platform as a product principles. This means that you treat the platform that your product teams use every day as a product in its own right, and one that is incredibly important in delivering value to all of your customers. The destination here is the kind of experiences tools like Heroku and Cloud Foundry give developers. One button deploys in a safe and secure way that meet the needs of both the product teams and the operations, security, and audit teams. Many companies are building platforms that help bring the Kubernetes and platform as a product worlds together, helping product teams get Kubernetes clusters that meet the needs of their security and compliance teams with things like logging metrics all ready to go in minutes or even less, right, rather than hours or weeks. This is a huge topic in its own right, but if you feel like you want to learn more about this, if you just search Google for Tanzu platform as a product, then you'll find a great white paper on this. Now let's quickly look at a couple of examples of modern companies successfully using Kubernetes to reduce their infrastructure costs. First, let's jump back to GiffGaff again and read this great quote. The automation team owns the platform. We provide a platform as a service to other teams. Our cluster scales up and down automatically. So at 3 a.m., when services are idle, it shrinks. At 3 p.m., the site's very busy, it scales up. Before Kubernetes, we couldn't do this. We treated VMs like pets, guessing how much capacity we needed for peak times, and we over-allocated 90% of the time anyway. The built-in features of Kubernetes means that they no longer need to bet what capacity they need for peak times, like Black Friday, and can instead save that money by only using the capacity they need. Oliver Beattie from Monzo, a challenger bank here in the UK, wrote a great blog post about how the Monzo team are using Kubernetes to build a highly available bank from the ground up. The system they've built to do this runs on Kubernetes, and as this graph shows, has drastically reduced the cost of their infrastructure after a quick initial investment. One of the clever examples the Monzo team talk about here is how they now run their high usage build jobs using spare capacity in their existing infrastructure, which is basically free. All right, so going back to the product lifecycle graph, let's say we've got through this maturity phase, and again, the inevitable happens, we move into decline. Miguel, what happens here?
So there are many reasons that could account for a decline in product. But in this scenario, we will assume customer satisfaction is down because of poor service levels. This quote from the team that wrote the Google SRE book is key to help us understand how to prioritize. So it reads, customer happiness is a rather fuzzy concept. We can't measure it precisely. Our experience has shown that 100% reliability is the wrong target. Of course, you want 100% customer satisfaction, but acknowledging that 100% service level is the wrong goal will help us avoid wasted investment. Because even with redundant components, automated health checking, and fast failover, there's still a small probability that something will fail simultaneously and you will not achieve this 100% target. Assuming you could hypothetically achieve 100% reliability, there is a complex chain of components between you and your customers, so they will not experience 100%. Let's now talk about the famous 9s of service levels. As you go from 2 9s to 3 9s, even to the mythical 5 9s, each extra 9 comes at an increased cost. To give you an idea, 3 9s give you a downtime of 8.77 hours per year. And the same allowed downtime goes down to 5.26 minutes with just 2 extra 9s. Just picture the investment required to get to this level. Due to the constraints from other elements in the chain, the real benefit to your customers reduces exponentially until it reaches almost zero, regardless of how much you keep investing. And you need to consider the number of one source of outages is change, pushing new features, applying security patches, deploying new hardware, and scaling up to meet customer demand. This means that you will reduce how much you update or improve your service, and sooner or later it will stagnate and your product will inevitably decline. So how is this related to Kubernetes, you might ask? Engineers are a scarce resource, even at the largest organizations. Engineering time should be invested in the most important characteristics of the most important services. So striking the right balance between investing in functionality that will grow your customer base versus investing in the reliability and scalability that will keep existing customers happy is difficult. This is where the automation of Kubernetes controllers, for example, can help us releasing some of that engineering time. You could even decide to go beyond and extend Kubernetes using the operator pattern, which will allow you to automate many of the human operations and releasing engineers from them. So as product managers, it is your responsibility to bring to the team enough information from what is valuable to customers and help them make a decision as to what is the best way to invest their time. Striking the right balance between managing reliability and improving your product. Right, so that's it for the product lifecycle. Matt, why don't we do a quick check on the agenda topics?
All right, thanks, Miguel. So if we quickly jump back over to our agenda, then hopefully we can mark the product lifecycle in Kubernetes card as done, which is awesome. So next up on our agenda is Miguel's going to talk to us about how we can apply some product practices to this world. Over to you, Miguel.
Okay, so we have taken our product through 4 different scenarios and show you how Kubernetes could help during each. But it's time for the fun part. We're now talking product. So let's play around with some product practices. We have handpicked some important objectives that came afloat during the product stages exercise. Your customers might say they want speed, as in performance, price, which is tied to your capital and operational expenditure. Service is key, as we discussed. Reliability is required to an expected level, or they simply want it now. Timing is important, as you might have the perfect solution, but if it's not ready when your customers need it, then it will be of no value to them. But before we make some uninformed prioritization, let's set a scenario which might help us do more than just guessing. So your product is web hosting for GeoCities. I hope someone remembers GeoCities. It was a long time ago. So your company has positioned your value proposition as being the fastest hosting, reliable, note the 3 9s here, and also a big differentiator is £1 a year. After speaking with stakeholders, analyzing the data from customers, you want to take some actions and avoid that product decline. So you hold a workshop and stand rank how praising the improvement of these outcomes is for your customers. Reliability comes last, as it seems like 3 9s is good in terms of service levels for them. Speed is second, and price is the most to the right here. So identify as the most valuable aspect for your customers now. So given that price was chosen, your team has decided exploring how to reduce price by reducing operational expenditure. So your team and relevant stakeholders hold a workshop where some how might we are proposed around reducing these operational costs. How might we is an excellent tool to help phrase outcomes without including solutions. So we take the proposed how might we's and we rank them according to perceived impact and effort by using one of the most well-known and probably my favorite prioritization framework, the impact versus effort matrix. So you want to look in that upper right quadrant where the least effort meets the most impact. In this scenario, we can say that your team thinks that releasing engineering time and avoiding vendor lock-in are in that sweet spot, or at least of least effort and more impact. There are many ways and many other frameworks to get to this prioritization, but the important aspect is to get your team to narrow their focus, giving them alignment in what you're trying to achieve. Right, so now we move to the fun part and the engineer's favorite, solutions. We want to do an ideation session to answer that question of how might we release some engineering time. You allow your team to diverge and have some personal thinking to come up with potential solutions. In this case, your team has suggested different options, like someone said, oh, why don't we do canary releases to reduce the risk of breaking up things upon release? Another person said, let's build a Kubernetes operator and automate these operations, which take a lot of time. Furthermore, let's replatform X application to Kubernetes, and that way we leverage on the Kubernetes automation instead of having to be on call to restart this app every time it crashes. And finally, someone said, oh, why don't we just create a tooling team? So from all these solutions, your team can start experimenting. It does not mean that you go heads down for 6 months and build something. I encourage you to take the lean approach into it. Experiments that might give you leading indicators of whether the solution will work, and just keep iterating on it. Well, that's all for practices. I'll give it back to Mac to check how we're doing on items and do the final section.
Yeah, so hopefully we've managed to achieve our goals of demonstrating how we believe Kubernetes can help product managers and product teams, no matter what stage of the product lifecycle they're working in, and also where some useful product practices can help. To finish off, we want to quickly go through a getting involved section, then finally a Q&A. So we promised we'd talk about how product people can get more involved in the community, but to be honest, this is where we think we need your help. There used to be a product management special interest group, but that no longer exists, and we're not really sure where product folks tend to hang out in this community. But we'd love to find out. We really do think that Kubernetes is a transformative technology, and this applies to product management equally as it does to software engineering. And we think some awesome things could be done by bringing these worlds close together. And so we'd love your feedback on this. You can either hang around now and ask us some questions, or alternatively, if you'd like to give feedback on your own time, if you head over to bit.ly/butimapm with hyphens, you can leave your feedback there. Speaking from Miguel and myself, it's been a pleasure speaking with you all today. I hope you found this somewhat useful, and over to you all for any questions which we can try and answer.